So with the alarming global situation right now, I think it's fair to say we've all felt that creeping anxiety, right?
Mm.
Who hasn't looked at the news and felt a little bit of a headache coming on?
Oh, absolutely. It is, it's definitely in the air lately.
Yeah, and today we're actually digging into some project notes from two ambitious students, Kesser and Steen. They're from a nature and innovation class, and they basically went down this massive rabbit hole.
Right, after watching some prepper videos with Steen's dad, I believe.
Exactly. They were trying to figure out how to harvest clean tap water in an acute emergency and also for long-term use. But as they quickly realized, it's really not that easy to figure out.
No, it is incredibly complicated once you get past the surface level.
Right. So our mission for this deep dive is to look at the greater perspective here. We're not doing a step-by-step DIY tutorial today. I'm not going to tell you, what size PVC pipe to buy.
Thank goodness, because that would be a very dry listen.
Literally.
Yeah.
So we're looking at their source stack, which includes CDC guidelines, technical specs from the NSF and EPA, and some really fascinating research on biological and atmospheric water harvesting.
It's a great collection of data, really robust.
It is. But I do need to issue a quick, very sarcastic warning to you right now. If your big survival plan is just doing a quick Google search or asking an AI chatbot how to fix your water supply during a total grid collapse, you are in for a very rude awakening.
Oh, very thirsty awakening.
Seriously, AI is going to lead you so far out on a tangent it's not even funny. But before we get to the AI absurdities, let's set the stage. Why is water the ultimate prepping headache?
Well, it comes down to basic human physiology. I mean, you can survive for weeks without food, right? Your body will just consume its own fat and muscle.
Which doesn't sound fun, but you'll live.
Exactly. But water, you've got maybe 3 days, a few days at best. That ticking clock forces you into this brutal, immediate compromise between short-term survival and long-term risk.
So let's talk about the most common compromise, which is the very first logical question Kesser and Steen bring up in their notes. The power goes out, so you just catch rainwater in a barrel and boil it, right? Problem solved.
Yeah, that's the classic assumption. But the biology in these sources shows that is largely a myth, or at least an incomplete solution.
I like to compare boiling water to, like, mowing a lawn that is just full of weeds. You cut down the immediate problem so you can't see it, but you definitely did not kill the roots.
That is a perfect analogy. Boiling doesn't achieve total sterilization. It only achieves what microbiologists call a killer factor reduction.
Okay, wait, break that down for me, because I always thought boiling water made it completely hospital-grade sterile.
Most people do. But a killer factor is basically just a major reduction in population. The extreme heat ruptures the cell walls of most active bacteria and viruses.
So it kills the easy stuff.
Right, it drops the pathogen levels down to something your immune system can probably fight off. But nature is, it's incredibly stubborn. Certain bacteria are spore formers.
Spore formers. That sounds ominous.
It is. When they sense extreme heat, like water approaching 212 degrees, they basically shut down their active metabolism and hide inside a heavily calcified protein shell.
Oh, wow. So they just wait it out.
Exactly. They can survive boiling, freezing, even radiation in that state. And then, once that water cools down and ends up in your stomach, the shell dissolves and they wake right back up.
That is terrifying.
Yeah.
So even with boiling, you're still playing microscopic roulette.
You really are, and that is just the microbiological side. The sources point out that water prepping is actually a two-front war.
Right, the chemical side and the biological side.
Yes. Heavy metals, toxins, pesticides, and boiling is entirely useless against chemicals. In fact, if you boil water with lead or arsenic in it, the water evaporates, but the heavy metals stay behind.
Oh, so you're just making a more concentrated poison.
Precisely. You're condensing the toxins.
Okay, but let me push back on this a little bit. If I am 3 days into a crisis and I am literally dying of thirst, do I actually care about long-term chemical exposure? I mean, I just want to survive the week.
And that's a very valid point. The sources acknowledge that acute survival always trumps long-term risk. But the goal of a prepping perspective is to avoid that forced choice entirely.
Which is why the notes emphasize that any gear you use has to be food grade at a bare minimum.
Exactly, because if you panic and catch rainwater in a standard chemically treated plastic trash can, those industrial chemicals leach into the water instantly.
And then you're dealing with acute gastrointestinal distress on top of everything else.
Right, which just dehydrates you faster and accelerates that 3-day biological clock.
So, keeping that reality in mind, let's get into this hilarious high-tech tangent from the project notes. Steen's dad goes to the local hardware store and finds this domestic waterworks pump, like a Husqvarna, for about $100.
Just a standard pressure tank, right?
Yeah, exactly. And the students decide to use Google and ask an AI how to turn this basic pump into a survival-grade purifier.
Oh, I can only imagine the results.
It is so enthusiastically unhelpful. The Internet AI recommends they install a microfiltration system that goes down to 0.02 microns.
Well, sure, mathematically, that's very clean.
Oh, it gets better. As the top recommended method, the AI insists they use an ultraviolet light treatment system.
An ultraviolet light for a
Uh,
grid down emergency.
Right. I was laughing so hard. Where exactly am I plugging in this high-intensity UV light when the electrical grid is collapsed? Am I wiring it to a squirrel?
It completely ignores the context of the problem.
Exactly. It just scrubs the internet for the best laboratory standard and spits it out. But this leads to what the notes call the reverse osmosis trap, because AI loves recommending RO systems.
Oh, they do. And on paper, according to the NSF and EPA data, reverse osmosis is amazing for the chemical front. It removes lead, VOCs, PFAS, arsenic.
Because it's forcing the water through a super dense membrane.
Right. Yes, using intense osmotic pressure. Only the pure H2O molecules can squeeze through. But the massive catch, which is totally ignored by these AI chatbots, is the water waste.
This part of the notes blew my mind. Walk us through that waste ratio.
To keep that microscopic membrane from immediately clogging up, a standard RO system constantly flushes itself. So to produce just 1 single gallon of clean drinking water, it rejects and flushes away 5 to 10 gallons of water.
Wait, really? 5 to 10 gallons wasted for 1 good gallon?
Yes, that is the standard rejection rate.
That is an absurd amount of water. Imagine you're in a survival scenario. You spend all day carefully harvesting 10 gallons of rainwater, and your fancy AI-recommended machine just spits 9 gallons of it into the dirt.
It is a terrible strategy for an off-grid emergency, and to make it worse, standard RO isn't even designed to remove microorganisms.
Wait, so it doesn't even catch the bacteria?
Some viruses are small enough to slip through, and bacterial colonies can actually grow through the membrane if the system loses pressure.
So you're throwing away 90% of your water, needing serious electrical pressure, and you can still get sick.
Exactly. Relying on modern, power-hungry, water-wasting tech is just a completely broken prepping strategy.
Okay, so Kesser and Steen realized that tech bro AI advice is useless. So they Skype their cousin Andreas, who has some real-world experience being far off the grid, and he reads them the riot act, straight from the CDC.
The CDC is delightfully blunt about the realities of rainwater harvesting.
They really are. They completely ruin the romantic idea of catching pure sky water. Basically, rainwater's just roof soup.
Roof soup is a very accurate, very gross way to put it.
It's true, though. It's whatever's on your roof. The CDC lists bird poop, dust, smoke particles, asbestos from old shingles, lead, and copper leaching from your gutters.
Especially after a long dry spell. All that biological waste just bakes in the sun, waiting for the first rain to wash it directly into your barrel.
So cousin Andreas tells them about a practical mitigation called a first flush diverter, which is actually brilliant.
It's a very elegant mechanical solution. It's essentially a pipe with a floating ball inside. When the rain starts, the first batch of water, that highly toxic roof soup, fills this chamber.
And then the ball floats up and seals it off.
Exactly. Once that dirty water chamber is full, the ball blocks the opening, and all the subsequent, much cleaner rain flows past it and into your main storage tank.
So you're basically dumping the first 5 gallons of toxic sludge to protect the rest of your supply.
Right, and you combine that with fine mosquito screens so insects don't breed in there. But even then, the CDC is very strict. They advise only using rainwater for washing non-edible plants unless it's heavily treated.
Which brings up a really interesting point from the sources about water standards in general. They mention Danish groundwater standards and how chemical limit values are inherently political.
Yes, and we should clarify, by political, they don't mean left-wing or right-wing partisanship.
Right, they mean negotiated.
Yeah.
Because scientists obviously can't lock humans in a lab and test poison exposure on them to see exactly when they die.
Exactly. So these regulatory bodies have to look at the toxicology data and make a negotiated bureaucratic decision on what is an acceptable risk. Potable water is a legally defined term, not an absolute state of purity.
And speaking of bureaucracy, this is the most mind-boggling fact in the whole stack for a prepper. Depending on where you live, collecting rainwater might actually be illegal.
Yes, the legal infrastructure is a huge hurdle. In many places, especially out west, the state or downstream agricultural corporations legally own the precipitation before it even hits your roof.
So you're trying to survive the apocalypse, and you get a fine from the government for stealing their clouds. It's wild.
It just highlights that prepping isn't just about wilderness survival, it's about navigating human legal systems too.
Definitely. Okay, so we've tossed out the useless AI tech, we're avoiding the legal red tape. Let's get into what Kesser and Steen's class is actually about. Nature and innovation.
Yeah.
What are the real solutions?
This is where the research gets really inspiring. They look at low-tech, highly efficient systems. The biosand filter is a prime example.
I love the biosand filter. I like to think of it as a probiotic for your water supply.
That's exactly what it is. It's a container layered with gravel and sand, but the magic happens in the top layer, which is called the biological zone.
Also known as the Schwitzdeck, which is just fun to say.
It is. The Schmutzdecke is a living ecosystem of beneficial predatory bacteria that naturally forms on the surface of the sand over a few weeks.
Wait, so it's a living filter?
Yes. When you pour contaminated water in, this ecosystem of good bacteria literally eats the pathogenic organisms. It traps the bad viruses and bacteria and consumes them.
That is so cool. So unlike a mechanical filter that just gets clogged and dies, this living filter actually gets stronger the more dirty water you feed it.
Precisely. It requires absolutely zero electricity, no chemical tablets, no replacement cartridges. Just nature doing what nature does.
Incredible. And then the notes shift to what sounds like total sci-fi tech, but it's totally real.
Right.
Atmospheric water harvesting, literally pulling water out of thin air.
Which is fantastic because it completely bypasses the whole roof soup problem. No bird droppings, no heavy metals.
Right, so how does this work?
It's based on passive condensation and the dew point. Basically, if you make a surface colder than the ambient night air, the invisible water vapor in the air will collide with it and condense into liquid drops.
Like a cold drink sweating on a hot day.
Exactly the same principle, but the next level prepping method they research uses hygroscopic materials.
Okay, hygroscopic. That's like those little silica gel packets you get in a shoebox, right?
Yes, but for water harvesting, they use specialized salts. You expose these salts to the air at night, and they just passively suck the moisture right out of the atmosphere.
So they just sit there and swell up with water.
Yep. They absorb it until they become a heavily saturated brine, and then during the day, you use the sun.
You bake it.
Right. You put that brine in a closed container, the sun heats it up, and the pure water evaporates out of the salt. It hits the top of the container, condenses, and drips down into your cup as pure distilled water.
Wow. And then the salt is dry again, ready for the next night.
It's a completely passive, closed-loop system. They also mentioned fog nets, which are these large mesh screens that literally catch microscopic water droplets from the wind.
I've seen pictures of those. They just set them up on hillsides and the water runs right down into a trough.
Yes. And when you look at the bigger picture here, these methods bypass everything we talked about earlier. No ground pesticides, no reverse osmosis wasting gallons of water, zero grid electricity needed.
It is the ultimate long-term prepping mindset. You're working with the planet instead of trying to force a broken machine to work.
Exactly.
So, summarizing this whole journey, Kesser and Steen's headache really proved a major point. If you're facing an acute water crisis, you cannot just ask an AI for a quick fix.
No, genuine prepping takes a real understanding of your local biology, your weather patterns, and actual physics.
Yeah, I mean, AI is great if you want to write some code or generate a weird recipe, but it's remarkably useless at keeping you hydrated in the apocalypse.
It really is. And it leaves us with a pretty provocative final thought to ponder.
Oh, definitely. Lay it on us.
Well, as we surround ourselves with all this complex, grid-dependent smart technology, are we slowly losing the ancestral biological knowledge required to build something as simple and life-saving as a biosand filter?
That is a scary thought.
Right. What invisible resources, like the humidity in the air or the helpful bacteria in the dirt, are just sitting right in your backyard, completely ignored, while you rely entirely on these fragile pipes running under your street?
Seriously, it makes you look at your kitchen faucet totally differently, like you're just trusting this invisible system to keep you alive.
Well, definitely something to chew on or sip on, I guess. Keep exploring, stay curious, and we will catch you on the next deep dive.